Hello, I'm Dr. Ron England, and I'm going to take you through a lecture on, it's going to cover a little bit of XML, going to cover a little bit of reflection, and what I'm going to show you may not appear really that great at once, but once you can kind of realize what you can do with it, you'll find that it's quite amazing. So I've got this project that I've built right here up and running. And I got three text boxes here, name, description, and content. It really doesn't matter what the text boxes are. But I'm going to go ahead and put in name. I'm going to put my name in here. Description, I am the instructor. And the content would be material for COP 4834. And I'm going to hit this second go. And the reason I did two goes is if I hit this first one, it fills in this box with the contents of the name and description as XML. However, if I hit the second one, I get a dangerous request form, which I'm actually going to show you how to handle that, because what it's doing is when I did that first text box, it filled in the third text box with some XML, which is dangerous. Let's go back a little bit. Let's clear this text box out and then hit the go, and you can see that it fills it in. There is a way to get past that error, and that is to put something in the header of your page. But right now I'm not going to worry about that. So the dangerous thing that you saw there was the fact that this is actually being, the system recognizes this is XML or HTML in a text box and realizes that pulling that in could be dangerous. Now there are times when you want to do that. So that's important. And let's do that. Let's run this one more time so I get this error. You can see the potentially dangerous request form value was there. And it does say that, it does tell you in here what it recommends that you do. However, I'm going to jump right over to the actual pages here. Go ahead and stop this. Here's the page that is doing this. Let me go ahead and close the toolbox here so you get more room. I go to the source, and I can go up to the page, and then I can do the validate request equals false, and it will actually suppress that error. That's just the page directive at the top of the page. That's another way to get rid of it. But it is actually a valid, having that server error in application is valid there because it is detecting something that could potentially be dangerous. But let's look at this and see exactly what I'm doing here. The actual interface here was not that tremendously difficult to do. And if you look at it, it's just designed with two text boxes, a go button, a text box, a go button, and another text box. So if I were to look at the actual code here, here's what I did. I'll look at the second go. The second go button does this. It reads the name from the text box, the description, and the content, and then it creates this class, and this is a class that I've created called sample properties inherited s equals new sample properties inherited. And these properties are being pulled from the text box, name, description, and content, and then it brings back the text as XML. And as XML is a method that I wrote in sample properties inherited. So let's go over to sample properties. Now I did this way so you can see how the inheritance also works here. I created a class called sample properties with two properties. Name, you can see there, public string name, and description, and then it's just a property, just a standard C# property, nothing fancy or tricky. And then I created this public string as XML, and what I did here was I created a string, and then using reflection, I set this other string to get type. And reflection is a library of classes that allows you to pull back the information about a class. It's actually the type of class that you would use in IntelliSense, where it pulls back information and does stuff with it about the actual class itself. So let's come back down here and look at this. Well, what I did is I got the type and I converted it to the string. Well, the type of this class is sample properties. Okay, it's the class name. And however, it actually is a full class name. It's actually database sample1.appcode.sample properties. So this next little chunk of code here just removes everything except for that last class name. So the part before it, which was the namespace, it gets rid of that. Now, here's where I get to some interesting stuff. Now, I do create a string here, and that string first puts the name of the class in the brackets and then puts a new line character there. That's why you've got the new line character down here, sample properties inherited in the new lines, and it put the different XML tags within here. Okay, so now what I do is I do for every property, and I use the variable property in this.getType get properties, which returns the properties of the class that you had there. I then use the name of the property. I use the value of the property and the name of the property to border. There's my property, content, and there's the contents of it, the actual internal values, name and description. Okay, it goes through all the properties and does that. Now, in the class sample properties, it's only going to do the properties name and description. If I go down here, I created a third class, and all I did in the third class, I'm sorry, a second class called sample properties inherited, where I inherited sample properties. And I added another property called content. So that when I did my class as XML, and you look at the code, it returns the results as XML, but it created a sample properties inherited, so it gives you the values of these three properties. Now you're probably thinking right now, unless you're really looking ahead to what you can do with this, is so what? Well, so what is that you can now create a class with properties and now create a textual description as XML of all the properties in the class itself. So now all the properties of the class are actually there. Well, what can I do with this? Well, if you think about it, I can create a class, put all the properties in there, and I can now save the class as an XML structure. Well, what if the class contains other classes? Well, as long as those classes inherit from something like sample properties that has this ability to respond to itself as XML, then I can create within the other class, I can call the base, but I can make the classes that are inside the class call the as XML, which would just basically make embedded XML within here. Okay, which I will probably do in a later lecture to better describe that. But hopefully you can see you've got some serious capability now of taking classes and now describing those classes as XML. So essentially they can be serialized as XML, but here's code to do it. Hopefully this is useful. We are going to be using this in some of the classes that I teach because we're going to be taking classes, actual C# classes, not classes that I teach classes, and saving their contents into a database as a large XML string. So some pretty neat capability, hopefully very useful to you. I think it's pretty interesting stuff that you can do this and has some very strong capabilities of making patterns and not having to write a lot of code to do things. Thank you very much. Good programming.